Aloha friends, and welcome to our weekly Sunday message from Lihue United Church on the island of Hawai'i. My name is Tychkin, and I'm so happy you could join us today. If you have lived long enough, then you probably remember that 1989 was the year when the infamous Berlin Wall came down in Europe. The communist Eastern Bloc countries fell apart, and the wave of freedom and independence revolutions swept over the former Soviet Union. Many exclaimed, "Finally, freedom!" Oppressive regimes that persecuted dissidents and imprisoned opposition fell like giants on clay feet, and liberty became real for millions of people. Strangely enough, or maybe it's not so strange after all, decades later, there are countless people who still dream and want to go back to the good old days. They look at communism as the best thing that has ever happened. Our story from the Bible this week goes back to the ancient times, yet this issue is as relevant as ever in our modern days. We read in the book of Numbers, "And then all Israelites complained against Moses, saying, 'Would it not be better for us to go to Egypt? Let us choose a captain and go back to Egypt.' After decades of slavery in Egypt, abuse, torture, and humiliation, the people of Israel are finally free. Their chains are broken, free to be whoever they want and do whatever they wish. The new life is in front of them. The future is wide open. The sky is limitless and bright. To make it even better, God makes a promise to be with them every step of the way as long as they are faithful. There is nothing to be afraid. And yet, even though they are free, they are more miserable than ever. The black hole of misery is poisoning their hearts as they grumble and complain and think wistfully about the time when they were slaves in Egypt. All of a sudden, the chains, the humiliation, and the abuse in the hands of their oppressors aren't looking so bad anymore. Let's go back to Egypt, they say. Sadly, in our own lives, this situation is way too common and causes many people great anguish and pain. On the one hand, everyone wants to be free and reach for the stars, yet on the other, we find ourselves strangely attached to those old chains and dangerously addicted to the benefits of our imprisonment. We hate our cages and yearn to break from behind the bars, yet we find the cage secure and safe. No need to worry about the food or enemies on the prowl. The cage is cozy, familiar, and predictable. Your soul wants to be free, but freedom is dangerous. It has no security, no insurance, and no guarantees. It means walking on the razor's edge all the time, learning to live with uncertainty and possible failure, taking unpopular stands that go against the mainstream of those who are still bound by their heavy chains and shackles. It may happen to us when we reach a critical point and know we have to start on a new path. Perhaps we've been living our lives away from God, and the Spirit starts urging us to draw closer. With enthusiasm, we start searching the Word and pray. We find a spiritual home and get involved in service projects, and then, out of the blue, as it often happens in our spiritual journeys, we start experiencing setbacks and hardship. And the tiny little voice whispers in our ears, "Let's go back to Egypt and things will get back to normal." Or maybe we're trying to break free from a toxic or dysfunctional relationship. We cut loose, open to new possibilities, and make our first steps. And then unexpectedly comes loneliness and despair, and we hear the same old, "Let's go back to Egypt," onto the old familiar cage. Or perhaps it is a long-time addiction that is destroying our life, and we finally make a commitment and seek help of the higher power to break free and start fresh. And then when the going gets tough and our body screams for the old poison, we hear, let's go back to Egypt because you're still a slave. Accept your fate, stop fighting, and let's go back to Egypt. Israelites in our story quickly forgot the pain and the shame of slavery. Our minds are designed in such a way that when they go back to the past, they often filter out the negative and painful experiences and focus only on the security and relative comfort of the good old days. The truth is that going back and returning to our Egypts never brings relief. It's self-defeating and soul-crushing. It robs us of power to move forward and fulfill our destiny. It rejects God's guidance and leadership, doubts His promises, and forfeits His blessings. Out of all the people who were freed yet wanted to go back to slavery, only 2 were able to enter the promised land. They kept believing in God's promises and remembered God's provision. When everyone else was consumed with doubt and fear of uncertainty, they stood firm in the power of God and were committed to move forward and fulfill God's plan and purpose for their lives. My friends, if there is still something that enslaves you and keeps you from reaching your potential and fulfilling your destiny, I invite you to drop your chains, trust God with your life, and allow Him to become your guide on the path to eternity. Keeping you and your loved ones in my thoughts and prayers, may God bless us all.